Hello and welcome to Something's Off with Andrew Heaton. I'm your host, Andrew Heaton, and your car gets pretty good gas mileage. Well, it's almost May, and yet again, no universities have decided to give me an honorary degree. Not even Vassar. Despite the fact that I'm a former diplomat and have never been convicted of arson. Given how expensive degrees are, though, maybe, universities don't want to pass out lambskins for fear of deflating their value. Now, I graduated from the University of Oklahoma with majors in history and religious studies because of the big history factory down the street from my hometown in the history district. Originally, I had been accepted to Vanderbilt, which I've never actually been to, and I don't know a lot about, other than it sounds prestigious. And I also imagine people who matriculate there know what boat shoes are. I think they're loafers. I had intended to go to Vanderbilt to get a theater degree, but my parents talked me out of that because I could go to the University of Oklahoma with in-state tuition on a partial scholarship, or I could go to Vanderbilt and mortgage my kidneys for an expensive but useless theater degree. Their position was that an expensive Vanderbilt boat shoes degree made sense if I wanted to go into the business world and make connections at the college, or if I managed to drop a baby anchor in some moneyed debutante and could spend the rest of my life drinking mint juleps on a plantation. My abilities to close a deal, however, in business or with debutantes is questionable enough that we decided it was better for me to go to OU. Had I gone to Vanderbilt, I would have had to get student loans, which is the subject of today's show. The student loan debt bubble is massive. It's $1.5 trillion. That's more than credit card debt is, prompting various thinkers and politicians to figure out solutions. One partial solution comes from Mitch Daniels, who is the president of Purdue University, and in some saner universe than ours, President of the United States as well. Purdue offers an option where instead of taking out a student loan, you can agree to pay the university a portion of your income the first few years out of college. So instead of being saddled with $200,000 in debt for the rest of your life, the university garners your wages for a set number of years, with business majors paying a higher percentage and education majors paying a lower percentage. Daniels also started the Degree in 3 program so that liberal arts majors like me can graduate a year early and save about $20,000. And he took a pay cut to the tune of $130,000, and he fired a slew of vice presidents. And the result? Purdue's a lot more affordable. Now, we can contrast this with Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, who are defaulting on the time-honored tradition of trying to solve a problem by throwing money at it. Warren would like to forgive about 95% of student loan debt. Sanders would like to make every public university free. I think most of the Democratic contenders in the field right now want to have, I'm not going to call it free, have tax-funded universities, with the exception of Pete Buttigieg. The immediate concern I have with this kind of free college plan is, does anyone want to look into why universities have become so expensive? Maybe we should figure out what's causing the problem before we try to smother it in other people's money. When adjusted for inflation, the cost of public college has skyrocketed by 213% since 1988. Now, normally, Warren and Sanders could blame evil, greedy rich people for raising prices, but we're talking about public universities, not evil capitalists and top hats like me. Why have public universities run and staffed by progressives at nonprofit institutions gone up in price by 200% or more? And it turns out the problem is precisely that we've been throwing money at it. Here's what happens. The government provides student loans to go towards university tuition. To try and get that sweet tuition money, public universities build bigger gyms, better dorms, larger cafeterias with better food, more emotionally receptive vice presidents, and water parks, and so forth, to compete for student enrollment. What we've done is we've created a kind of academic arms race. And the whole thing is fueled by federally subsidized student loans. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York, which is not exactly a right-wing think tank, calculated about a year ago that for every dollar of federally subsidized loans, tuition prices rise by 60 cents. So again, when you throw a dollar at the problem increases by 60 cents. And Elizabeth Warren wants to solve this problem by slopping more money on it, smother the grease fire with a larger bucket of grease. And she's joined by a growing chorus of progressives who would like to make public universities free, which, based on what we've seen so far, sounds like it would be massively expensive. A lot of my friends have large student loans, and I feel very sorry for them, and I'll tell you why. They've been screwed over. They've been screwed over And I think the specific culprit is the federal government on 2 points. First, you can't default on student loans. A corporation can declare bankruptcy, but you can't, at least in regards to your student loans. You're stuck for life. Second, we've encouraged students to take these loans for degrees that no one in the private sector necessarily wants or cares about. So they have little hope of making enough money to pay the loan off. Right now, federal law turns students into indentured servants under the guise of compassion. And I would argue that they're effectively conveyor belts between federal loan programs and universities. I would rather we treat students like corporations. I know that sounds weird, but if you're a corporation, you get the right to declare bankruptcy. Also, I would like to see corporations involved in student loans rather than the federal government. Think about this. If you approach Berkshire Hathaway and said, I'd like $80,000 for a degree in 17th century English literature gender comparisons. In exchange, I'll pay you a portion of my income in that field after I graduate. They're going to say, no, that's a bad investment. There's not enough jobs that want that particular degree to warrant giving you that amount of money. But if you're interested in getting an engineering degree, we'd be willing to invest in that because the private sector actually wants engineers. We're going to go in depth on this in a few minutes. We're going to go down the wonk hole with a very good friend of mine who has a different perspective, but is, I think, equally versed and educated in the field. So we're going to talk about that in a minute. But before we do, I have to pay the bills. And that means a word from our sponsor. Something's Off with Andrew Heaton is brought to you by Toaster Insurance from Factory Farm. Portrait of a man. Henpecked, far-sighted bank teller Henry Bemis. Middle-aged with thick mustache and thicker glasses, Mr. Bemis has one all-consuming passion in life: toast. He is a veritable connoisseur of Vegemite, Marmite, jam, strudel, butter, and jelly. He makes toast at work when balancing ledgers. He makes toast at home as soon as he wakes up and before he goes to sleep. At church, he sits in a pew near the back due to its proximity to an outlet and quietly makes and eats toast during the sermon. It's a Unitarian church, so that's fine. One day at work, a little box filled with pinstripes and numbers, he goes down to the bank vault to eat toast in privacy, and that's when the Soviets drop the H-bomb, a titanic explosion of unfathomable energy, turning people into puffs of smoke and cities into glowing pebbles. When he exits the vault, the city is in ruins. Fortunately, the bread depository was unaffected, and the jam arsenal is as well. Now, there's time enough in the world for all the toast he could ever want. But when he pushes down the lever on his toaster, he makes a terrible discovery. It's haunted by tiny dinosaurs because he's on Mars. Looks like Mr. Bemis just got a thick buttered slice of the Twilight Zone. Guess he should have bought some toaster insurance when he had the chance. Toaster Insurance from Factory Farm protects your toaster from unforeseen circumstances in life so that you can keep toasting to your heart's content. Sleep well knowing that when you wake up, your toaster is safe. Toaster Insurance from Factory Farm. We've got your back and your toaster. Before I bring on my guest, it's time for a day in the life of Hillary Clinton. 7 o'clock. Wake up. Walk into mock Oval Office to drink coffee and read morning briefs prepared by staff. 8 o'clock. Breakfast with Angela Merkel impersonator. 9 o'clock. Drill time. Huma Abedin provides me with a random crisis scenario. After considering its scope and implications, proceed to White House press briefing room replica to give improvised speech on how I will handle Yemeni attack on American merchant marines. Field questions from interns representing various press outlets. Mindy, the worst intern, is Fox. Do not acknowledge Mindy. 9:45. Notice Bill coming into house wearing yesterday's clothes. Did you sleep at the office again? Yes. Yes, he did. Yes. 10 o'clock. Go back to mock Oval Office to answer red phone. Talk to Putin impersonator for 30 minutes about nuclear proliferation treaty. 11 o'clock. Practice smiling. 11:30. Call astronauts to congratulate them on their historic mission to the International Space Station and to thank them for their service to the American people, and beyond that, to mankind itself. When astronauts claim they are busy and try to get out of the phone conversation, tell them, hold on, just one more thing. And then plot out my 8-point plan to rejuvenate NASA for the 21st century called Star-Spangled Frontier Initiative. 12 o'clock. Luncheon with Justin Trudeau impersonator. 1 o'clock. Call Judge Merrick Garland to inform him that, if elected president, I would have chosen him to replace Justice Scalia. After he thanks me, why don't we run through that conversation as it would have been, with me as president and you thanking me, as the president, for nominating you to the Supreme Court. 1:30. Ask legal team at the Clinton Foundation to look at the Constitution again to see if there are time limits on when you can do a recount. Like, even though it would be kind of weird, could you conceivably do a recount a year before the next election? Is that a thing? I feel like maybe that happened with Grover Cleveland. Go ahead and look into that. 1:45. Hold Joint Chiefs of Staff meeting simulation with interns acting as various military heads. Mindy has to be the Coast Guard. 2:30. Call random numbers in Wisconsin and scream into the receiver before slamming the phone down. 3 o'clock. Meet Bill's new 23-year-old social media coordinator, a former cheerleader from the University of Tampa, and Bill's new chief researcher, her twin. 3:30. Call Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador and offer to meet with him as acting American president so that he can avoid talking to that other guy, just as a courtesy to him and the great people of Mexico. 4:30. Take a little me time by painting. Really coming along as a painter. First painting I made of the White House was flat and uninspiring, but the 456 painting of the White House, though, is quite good. Quite good. 5 o'clock. Call legal team over at the Clinton Foundation. Hypothetically, if someone cashed in a favor to become Undersecretary of Parks at the Department of Labor, how many people would need to die in order for the Undersecretary to get to the top of the line of presidential succession? More or less than 40 people, hypothetically. 5:30. Summon interns for a mock State of the Union address. Mindy, who is supposed to be a Supreme Court justice, forgot to bring her judicial robe to work today. Call in Secret Service and cooking staff to watch as I yell at Mindy for 30 minutes for her contemptible idiocy. Incompetence is not tolerated in this administration. Everyone got that? 5:15. Dinner with Chelsea and the grandkids. 6:30. Swing by the dungeon to feed and water Jill Stein. 6:45. Have a nice glass of rosé while watching old campaign videos. 7:30. Ask Mindy why she's at the office this late. Mindy is apparently working on a project with Bill and his social media coordinator and chief researcher. 8 o'clock. Call random numbers in Michigan and scream, "Are you happy? Are you happy now?" 9 o'clock. Head to bed. Stare at ceiling, covered with pictures of the 2017 inauguration. Stare and stare. 11 o'clock. Sleep. My guest today is Royce Sharp. He is a filmmaker. He is a director. He is a good friend of mine. And he's back on the program. Royce, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me back. It's wonderful to be back. You know how much I love your show.
Thank
Beyond our friendship, it is actually good.
Yeah. Oh, I really. So even if we weren't friends, you'd like it?
I would still listen. I would still tune in. Yeah.
You have just raised the bar on incoming guests. I'm not gonna put them through a gauntlet on this of like, hypothetically, if you didn't like me, would you still like the show? And then they'll have to agree to that kind of thing, or otherwise I'll be mean to them.
Yeah. I mean, being in any sort of creative field, as I know you know, you're constantly faced with the struggle between friends whom you love dearly as people, and then maybe you're not such a big fan of what they do professionally. But thank you for presenting me with a situation where I can like you in both regards.
Oh, thank you. Yes, and I know what you're talking about. It's always a tad awkward. I'll say in stand-up comedy, it's one of the worst feelings you ever get is when you descend the stage and you know you've done poorly, and other comedians will try and be nice to you, and they won't make eye contact, and they'll say things like, "Hey, gosh, great diction up there. You really just, oh man, you pronounced the words right." And you're like, "Oh, just please shoot me. This is the worst feeling in the world. I'm going to hide out in a basement for 3 days. Ugh.
Or be honest with me. Yeah. Just tell me, hey, that was not so great. And you can maintain that level of mutual respect that hopefully you had before
the
you
upshot
took
is,
the stage.
when you're friends with stand-up comedians, don't tend to improv people tend to be very nice and very touchy-feely. Stand-up comedians don't. Stand-up comedians will just like immediately be like, looks like you dropped a testicle. Well, maybe better luck next time, buddy. Like there's kind of a, there's still that kind of like Borscht Belt Friars Club element to stand-up comedians. I like that. Well, what I wanted to talk to you about today was student loan forgiveness, student loan debt. This is an issue that, as I mentioned, it's one of the things that is a policy mark in the Democratic field right now. I think all of the candidates, well, not all of the candidates because there are 200 candidates, but kind of the top ones that are on the radar are in favor of taxpayer-funded college tuition, with the exception of Pete Buttigieg. And a number of them want to also pay off all of the student loans. Now, I mentioned in the opening monologue that I have a very big problem with this because I think it fails to take into account why everything's so expensive, and I don't want to throw money at things unless we can figure out what that is and fix it. So what is your read of the situation, and what would you do?
First off, I would say that, I'm very sympathetic to what you were saying in terms of just kind of the gross mismanagement of funds. You mentioned Purdue's president, and one of the things that he had done was decrease his salary and fire probably not even all of the vice presidents and administrators whose job basically consists of playing golf or whatever.
Feelings.
I think that
there's a lot of vice presidents dealing with feelings.
Right. I think that that's obviously a very good place to start. I think that within public education, you have a similar scenario to the military, where it's like, here you have a thing that absolutely should exist, but the people at the top are getting paid a lot of money, defense contractors, school administrators, whatever, and then the people at the bottom, Army privates, adjunct professors, are making barely enough to be on the right side of the poverty line, if that. But yeah, so
okay.
the mismanagement of funds
okay, good. We're in
for
agreement.
Sure, the best place to start.
Yeah, we're in agreement that there's a top-heavy dynamic to American universities, and I'll add to that they're also, and this isn't even so much as a criticism of just to sort of put things in perspective. We also tend to have a lot more at American universities than, say, European universities tend to do. Like French universities don't have cafeterias, or at least most of them don't. British universities don't have a lot of the the gyms and accoutrements that we expect at American universities. So we do tend to.
True.
There tends to be this sort of inbuilt experience. Like I suspect that if you just pared down universities to classes rather than trying to make them a very expensive life experience, they'd probably be a lot cheaper. At which point you'd make it easier for people to get into them.
Yeah. Which, while we're on the topic, I know you studied in Scotland.
I did. Proud graduate of the University of Edinburgh. Shout out to the Scots.
With a master's degree, no less.
I am a verified smart person. I have a certificate, and although this is a complete side note from our wonky conversation here. My certificate from the University of Oklahoma, my degree it's this beautiful thing. It's printed on cream-colored paper. It's got a seal on it. The Scots are in such a damn hurry to show everyone that they're not an old country. They're like, oh no, we're a quite new country. We're hip, and oh, look at that. Your degree, we're going to print it out on a printer for you, and it's got a hologram on it, and it looks just gaudy and awful. I don't know that I'll ever frame it. It has a hologram on it, like a little silver, like doodad you'd get on a scratch and sniff card. Anyway, yes, I have a degree from that.
Okay. Here's the thing. In general, I am very, very pro hologram across the board.
Yeah, me too, but not on degrees. Tupac, great. Obi-Wan Kenobi, fantastic.
I respectfully disagree. I think that the more holograms we can have in life, the better off we'll be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, but anyway, I've got a degree from Edinburgh as well, and they've got a different setup over there. In the UK, in Scotland, undergraduate degrees are taxpayer funded. So if you're Scottish and you go in Scotland, you don't pay for college.
Do you also get a stipend for living expenses like you do in virtually every other Western European country that I know about.
I don't know.
Is
I
that
don't. I don't
also
know
a thing?
about a stipend. I don't know about that. Nor do I know about that in England as well. I think what they do in England, you don't go to college for. I'm not going to say for free because that implies that.
Because it is taxpayer
Right.
funded.
Because
Yes, I
yeah.
also take issue with that. Yeah,
Unless we're actually enslaving the professors, which we're not
Right.
doing, it's taxpayer
Yet.
funded. But in England, what you do pay in England. However, it's all of the universities are capped at the equivalent of the federal level. So Westminster decrees that no university can spend over. I think no university can charge over X amount per student, which is one way to deal with college prices. Because if you went to a state college in the United States and you went, look, you can charge people a maximum of $5,000 a year. Okay, well maybe we won't have a pool anymore, or maybe we'll get rid of some of the vice presidents, or alternately we won't have a cafeteria. Like you'll have to figure something else out. We'll just strip it down to college classes. So they do have a different setup over there.
Yeah.
My problem. In the event that I move to Scotland, I won't cause a ruckus about this because it seems to be a pretty well-run country from what I can tell. However, the moral problem that I have with the model that they have put over there is, everybody can go to university, it's paid for by the state. Even when it's free to the recipient of the degree, it's only about 25% of the people in Scotland. I think it's 26% last I checked of people in Scotland that have a college degree. So about 3/4 of the people in Scotland are paying for what is effectively the top 25% of the people in Scotland to go to school, which is another one of my problems with the idea of free tuition in the United States. In the United States, we have a lower amount of people. I think it's about 12% of the people in the United States have a college degree. Presumably, if it were cheaper, more people would get it, but we can assume that it would be comparable to what they've got over in Scotland. So let's say 25 to 30%. That's still the vast majority of American taxpayers who are not going to be earning as much money because they don't have a degree, basically paying for the well-off to be more well-off. So I don't like that whole system put forth by, say, like Bernie Sanders. I actually rather like Pete Buttigieg on this one, who I think sees the kind of iniquity of that premise built into it, that you're going to tax everybody, mostly poor people, to pay for the middle class to get wealthier.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously am very familiar with this criticism of this policy, which I feel like this policy is actually two separate things. It's, should we be paying for college, and then how do we pay for it, assuming that the answer to that question is yes.
Mm-hmm.
And on the first question, the criticism is that this is taking money from poor people and giving it to rich people. And I mean, you just described making a decision about your education based on finances. Mm-hmm. I also did the exact same thing. I wanted to go to NYU's Tisch School of Arts, and as soon as I saw the price of that,
blanched.
Very quickly applied for school at Oklahoma State University,
which is the Tisch School of Arts of Western Oklahoma,
of Payne County, of Payne County specifically. People make decisions based on their finances, and I think that for a lot of Americans, they look at the cost of college and they think, even at a public university, that's not something that I will ever afford unless you're a valedictorian, a National Merit Scholar, unless you're this exceptional student. And so you do have, like you were saying, at least possibly 13% of the population that goes into the workforce without the education level that they're capable of attaining. I would assume mostly because of financial reasons, financial constraints.
Possibly. I mean, yes. Like I said, I think if you were to have, hey, all college from now on is taxpayer funded, no one has to pay at a public university, I think you'd see an increase in people going into college. I mean, that makes sense. If there wasn't a financial, if you don't have skin in the game, of course you're more apt to do it.
But specifically, I think that you would see an increase in people going to college from lower class families, who looked at that decision and said, there's no way that I can make the numbers work without going into at least 5-figure debt, if not
Well,
6.
no, so that's possible, but I do want to break that down some. So I think the premise you're starting with is that if someone's lower class and they want to go to college, we'd like for them to be able to go to college. And I agree with that premise. I'll say in general, if someone wants to go to college, you want them to be able to go to college. If they're coming from a lower economic threshold and they want to get a degree that's going to be a net gain for them financially, I'm very much in favor of it.
Right.
I'm less concerned for people that both of their parents went to college and they want to get a degree as an experience. I don't feel the government should be in the habit of paying for people's experiences. But for the people you're talking about, I think that's a very good segment to look at.
Yeah, and I'm saying that, fully aware of the fact that Pell Grants exist. Pell Grants, to my knowledge, at least they didn't for me, do not cover all of the costs associated with going to university. Although I do think that is a good program. But yeah, I mean,
Now,
it
I
does come
assume
down
Pell
to
Grants are federal grants. I think I'm probably against them.
federal grant money, some of which you have to pay back, some of which you do not, but it's federal grant money available to lower income students.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know the intricacies of Pell Grants in particular, but I do want to look at the breakdown of kind of where these loans are going for a moment, because when we look at this massive price tag, $1.5 trillion, that is just a huge amount, right?
That's an insane amount of money that could be in the economy. Could that money could go towards home ownership. That money could go towards people creating, possibly succeeding, possibly failing at whatever small business venture.
It's more than credit card debt.
It's a lot of money waiting, like acting as an anchor on our economy, I feel like.
But I want to kind of break it down further, because it is such a massive whopping price tag that when we look at kind of the actual rates, so the median amount of the median student loan debt at the moment for someone with a bachelor's degree is $25,000.
I've heard 29, but
okay.
Yeah.
Well, okay, let's say 29, because a lot of the time I mention this because sometimes people bring up like six-figure college loans that people are having to pay back, and those are pretty much only for people pursuing graduate degrees. And I have you want to be a doctor and you've got to take out $200,000, like great, you're going to be making a ton of money. I'm okay with you doing that. It's a very good investment in your case. So we're talking about $25,000 to $30,000 of median debt. I'm going to posit that it would be better for people in that position to go with a private sector, private-public partnership type phenomenon than it would be to get a federal grant. Because I think the federal grant is what's driving up the prices in all of this. And so the more of those federal grants you have, the more the universities are going to increase as I said, the cafeterias, the pools, all those kind of things, increase a lot of the time they'll, for understandable reasons, they'll want to decrease the amount of students per college class, but at the same time that drives up the price, that kind of thing. I think those federal grants basically are causing an arms race. What I would like to see happen is, for someone that's interested in getting a college degree, have some sort of company that has skin in the game that is going to garner their wages for some amount of time. So do a profit sharing model as opposed to a loan model, where if you want to go into engineering or you want to, whatever the thing is that you're going into, we'll give you that money. You're going to give us a percentage of your income for 5 years or whatever that is. You could work it out. But I think the benefit to that is then you're not going to tell people going into college, hey, just get a degree in anything. It's always good to have a degree, and then get a degree in something that no one really wants to pay you for, and then stick you with that price tag that you've got to pay off over the next few years. So I think a big impediment to this, to me, is getting the federal government out of the business of providing loans. I would like to see that happen. Once that happens, maybe we would do something where we'd freeze the current student loan bubble, or people would pay it back at a smaller pace or something. It's not like the government's making much money off of that, so it's not like a net windfall for anybody.
No.
But I would want the federal government to take a step out before we start tossing money at anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think where we differ is that I don't necessarily see the federal money as the crux of the problem so much as the incentive system that we've created, like you're talking about. Like if the world needs more engineers, if the world needs more doctors, more nurses, more teachers, whatever, then yeah, we need to create incentives to direct people toward those careers. instead of saying, sure, you can go study something totally useless like film, and we'll give you as much money as you want to take from us, on the condition that you can't declare bankruptcy.
Yeah.
For, I mean, just that alone, like allowing students to declare bankruptcy on their student debt would probably cause a market correction.
Yeah.
Would probably cause people to say, whoa, okay, where is that money going? What degree am I paying for? And so as to avoid, people getting, I don't want to say useless degrees, because I'm a huge believer in knowledge in general, and people in the pursuit of knowledge in general. Although, yes, I do think that certain knowledge is more valuable to society than other knowledge, but
I'm with you. I think you need to have the ability to declare bankruptcy, just because I think if you don't have the ability to declare bankruptcy, you're kind of like a serf of sorts, and I don't think that's a good place to be in. I think you're right in that it would have a market correction, but for it to have a market correction, it also has to have a private sector element to it, because if
I'm admitting my ignorance, isn't there already sort of a private-public partnership in the way that certain student loans are doled out?
Some of them. My understanding is that there's kind of two different phenomenons we can explore there. During the Obama years, there were private student loan companies that you could get your loan through. But basically they were private, but they were federally backed, so they were in this kind of quasi status, and the Obama administration,
like a Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac,
something like that. Where
And
basically Obama went, we're not going to do that anymore. You're if you're getting a loan, you're getting it through us. There are scholarships and things like that are at various universities. And then the other thing that is worth looking at is there are kind of public-private partnerships, like I mentioned, where Deloitte or someone will come in and go, we'd fund X amount of engineering degrees because we want that, and the agreement is that. I don't know the exact details of how they'll do it, but say I'm in a big engineering firm, I'd go in and go, hey, we'll pay for your engineering degree, and we'll do it in so long as you agree to work for us for 3 years outside of college, and that kind of thing. I know Purdue, going back to Mitch Daniels, he's got some programs like that there that I think are fairly promising. So that's where I would like to see things going. What I think would be the most helpful in terms of market corrections for degrees that you can't pay off. That would probably be best. So are you then in that, because you've been a big supporter of both Sanders and Warren in the past, do you like where their plan is at? Is that something that you endorse, or is this something where you would depart with them specifically on?
I agree with them on their stated goal. I am a huge believer in education in general. I love that all of my neighbors can read, can write, can do simple arithmetic.
I hate my literate neighbors.
I
lord over my ability to read.
I think that the more educated a society is, the better that society is to be in.
Okay.
I'm very pro education, including liberal arts, including the things that get made fun of and by people like me also. But
I think you and I are in the same camp of making fun of liberal arts degrees while having them.
Right.
I'm talking about engineering. I don't have an engineering degree. I'm not that intelligent. I'm good at words and abstract concepts.
That said, sometimes I wish that I would have studied physics, that I would have studied electrical engineering, that I would have studied math instead of studying film, and still gone into film. That whatever degree you have, if there are any young listeners, whatever degree you have does not necessarily dictate what your career is going to be. And oftentimes employers are more interested just in the fact that you have a bachelor's degree or the fact that you have a master's degree in anything, that's the thing that sets you apart from other applicants to whatever job it is that you're applying for.
Yeah, what I wish I'd done in my case, my parents, in addition to swaying me from going to Vanderbilt, they had recommended, like, hey, religious studies, history, great. Why don't you pick one of those and pair it with a business degree? And I was like, no, you don't understand, because I'm going to do both of them, and then one of them is going to take off, or my novels will, And then when I'm a rich novelist, then it'll be good that I like. And it was basically what I was saying was, I know I'm buying a lottery ticket, but I'm going to buy 2 lottery tickets, and that'll double my chances. And they were like, right, why don't you have a fallback career, which I do wish I'd done. I wish I'd got a degree in coding or in business or something else that I would have had a shingle that I could put up there. Okay, so you agree with you agree with Warren and Sanders in the broad sense that education is good, as do I. But would you when you're looking at, say, the Democratic debates coming up, are you more in the Pete Buttigieg camp of this is not, let's not have the tax fund or grab bag in this particular category, or are you more in the Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren camp of raise taxes on somebody and pay for it all with federal funds?
I will say that it is very complicated, and you know that I've been a huge fan of Elizabeth Warren since actually the economic collapse that she accurately predicted before virtually everybody else, aside from maybe Rooksley Bourne.
And Peter Thiel. There's also a few Austrian economists.
There's a few people.
Yeah, there's a few people around there that looked at that.
But that's not a long list. That's not a long list, and that's especially not a long list of the people that were doing their best to get out there and try and warn the public that, hey, this is coming. We should all be terrified. That the people that realized that what was going on doubled down, tried to exacerbate it, tried to make as much money off of it as possible. And so she will pretty much forever have my respect for that. And Elizabeth Warren is not. What's that?
I just made a dismissive noise.
Yes. Well, yeah. Why the dismissive noise?
I have a twofold problem with Elizabeth Warren. So here's where I'll give her some credit. In addition to the fact that she grew up near where we did, I think she went to Classen, although she's older than us. I would be friendly to her regardless, but we could talk shop about the old neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
I like that she was a Republican into her 40s. Not because not that I'm swinging for the Republicans there. I just generally like anybody that's spent time in another party, because it means that they probably have the ability to look at a problem from a different mindset. So I do appreciate that. Same as I appreciated the fact that Hillary Clinton was a Goldwater Republican. I think that probably means that if I sat down with Hillary Clinton, we could have a chat about economics and she would understand where I was coming from. I like that. So I like those elements of her. What I don't like about Elizabeth Warren is twofold. And I'll say this: I also think she's considerably smarter than Bernie Sanders. I
agree with that.
I think Bernie 100%. Sanders is running based on intent. Elizabeth Warren has, while I disagree with them, she does have more policy chops than Bernie Sanders does.
And the same intent. Largely.
Yeah, she basically has the same intent. Yeah, so she's in my mind a more dangerous version of Bernie Sanders. The twofold problems that I have with her are, one, I dislike. I dislike the attitude she brings towards everyone she disagrees with, which is one of withering moralism. I've watched her for several years. I've never seen her say anything nice about anyone she disagrees with. I've seen her one time when John McCain got brain cancer. She did, join a litany of senators and, say, fight on John, that kind of thing. But the rest of the time, if there's a Republican appointee or whoever it is, they're always a shill, or they're a Coke stooge, or they're evil. The worldview she's promulgating is a Manichaean one in which you're either good or you're bad. And I am sick to death of that dualistic nonsense, and she's not helping in that regard. The other problem I have with her is that she is looking to do. I'm sympathetic to the Nordic model that we talk about, that Bernie Sanders talks about a lot.
Right.
I'm sympathetic to it, which is the idea that, okay, we're going to have higher taxes, we're going to have more federal spending, but the caveat to that, which Sanders never points out, is that there's also a lot less regulation, and that spending is usually done on a local level, which is to say that you're paying higher taxes, but you know the guy that's spending the money because he lives in your county and you know what bar he drinks at. I'd be willing to do all of that.
And that person is accountable to you and your grievances.
And those are not the things Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders are promulgating. They want more spending, more taxes, and vast, larger regulatory frameworks for everything. And Elizabeth Warren in particular. Elizabeth Warren wants federal charters for large corporations. She wants, like Amazon and these various other companies, she wants to basically seize the board of directors and dictate who's on them, from the federal government. So like Amazon, I think would have to be, it's either 40 or 60%. The board would be 40 or 60% employee controlled. I can't remember the exact figures, but
it's less than 50, I believe.
Okay,
Yeah.
but nonetheless, though, she wants the federal government to dictate the composition of boards of directors to companies, which I think is a terrible idea. In addition to the fact that right now Donald Trump is the head of the federal government.
Another way of putting that is saying that she wants every workplace to be democratic, and that she thinks that the employees of those companies should benefit from the success of those companies.
And again, the enforcer of that's the government. So what she wants to do is have the federal government dictate, and that means that when we open up that gate, while I think that alone would be a bad idea, it also means you're giving that power of federal composition eventually to someone that you despise.
The government polices a lot of things.
And that's the thing.
Since the Clinton administration or even the Reagan administration, it has decreasingly policed Wall Street and the business community within the United States.
That's true. We've been in a deregulatory, or we had kind of a deregulatory thing happen during Carter. Give him due credit, and it happened during Reagan.
True.
Both of which
income inequality did start, in my opinion, in like 78.
Yes, that's right. There was never income inequality prior to that in American economics.
The Victorian era level absurdist income inequality. When you're looking at a graph and you see one line, which is our productivity, our GDP going up at a 45-degree angle continuously, and another line, which is worker pay, tracking along with it in the exact same way, and then flatlining. Yes, that started right at the end of Carter, right at the beginning of Reagan.
So that would more or less coalesce with when we begin getting into an information-based economy. Like none of that really surprises me. I think when you get the advent of the internet, when you get computers, you're going to see, at that point, you're not going to see a linear rate of productivity and pay the way we did with, say, like building widgets and that kind of thing. You're going to see a difference in it.
Where a company of 6 people can be worth as much as a company of 6,000 or even 60,000.
Yeah, and then more to the point, we don't have time to unpack this right now.
True,
but I think as you and I have previously established, and I've mentioned on the show, I am bothered by poverty. I'm not bothered by inequality. I believe you are bothered by both. So for me, that's not really a thing.
I'm not bothered inherently by inequality. I'm bothered by the degree of income inequality as it exists in the United States right now.
And so I'm bothered by inequality if it's basically exploitative by force, which is to say if we're like in a feudal dynamic where I am rich because I'm taking money from you, or if I'm a crony capitalist, or if I'm benefiting from some sort of arrangement that gives me a monopoly that keeps out competitors, that kind of thing. Then I
could make a pretty decent argument that that is the case.
Yeah, and I would agree with you. I mean, there is a lot of crony capitalism going on, and I'm absolutely against it. But the kind of idea that like inequality itself is bad. Where if I write a book and I get I make $15 million off of it, that somehow a great moral evil has happened. I disagree with that premise. You might too, but Bernie Sanders I think would be more in that camp. The other problem I have with Warren, before we lose sight of this, is she wants to do these really big, hyper intense regulatory regimes. Like she wants to wants to break up a lot of big internet companies. Was it Facebook? She'd like to split apart. And I look at these and go, these models don't apply to the old monopolies that we're concerned about. I'm not sure. I'm okay with breaking up certain large businesses, but even then I want to be careful about doing it. From what I can tell, she's basically going, they're unpopular and they're big. And so I want to break them up.
My guess is that Elizabeth Warren's take on it is a bit more nuanced than that. That seems like an oversimplification. And yeah, I would say that we have absolutely gotten away from enforcing antitrust, anti-monopoly laws. I realize, like you were saying, that our economy has evolved into something completely different than making widgets, but and probably necessitates like a different response in terms of combating the power that a company like Google or Facebook might wield over our society.
And see, that to me, like I look at this when I look at progressives and conservatives fighting against each other. So much of the time, it's a question of who gets to be in power and to impose their will on the people of the United States. And I look at power itself as a bad thing. I want to throw.
You don't think that applies to conservatives at all?
Oh, it does apply.
That same critique.
Yes,
yeah.
That's what I just said, Royce. I said when I watch conservatives
okay.
and progressives, like
Gotcha.
like particularly if we get like the Roy Moores of the world that want to use the state in order to to regulate who you have sex with, that kind of thing, like the social conservative. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. This is a big critique I have of conservatives and progressives both. I think that power itself is inherently dangerous, and I want to mitigate the amount of power that exists. For that reason, I'm sympathetic to. There are situations in which I could go, okay, like if power is so accumulated in a particular private company that's providing a vital good, maybe we should split it up. I'm not philosophically against the idea of an anti-monopoly law. However, if we're using that law because we just don't like the company, which is I think kind of what it boils down to. I mean, with Elizabeth Warren, you're right. I'm not giving her like a full 30-minute shrift. I'm sure that she would be very nuanced. And in the unlikely event that she's listening to this program, she's welcome to come on. And I'm sure that we've had a very good conversation. I'm sure that she would be very, very good at defending her positions on this. But she wants to regulate Facebook, and she recently had an ad about splitting up Facebook, and then they pulled it down, and she cited that as an example on Facebook of why Facebook has too much power. And I'm looking at this going, okay, so you want to break up Facebook. Facebook didn't post this, which doesn't surprise me. I wouldn't, if someone wanted to split my show in half, I wouldn't give them advertising space for it. And then she's still allowed to comment about it. And then beyond that, it's not like Facebook is providing plasma to people. It's a platform. There's a bunch of different platforms. You don't have to be on Facebook. I spend as little time as I can on it. So I don't see there being a dire need to do anything there. What I see is an unpopular company that she wants to put under the aegis of government. And I think that's a control freak vibe, and I don't like it.
Power exists, right? And like I don't think that it's a control. She's wanting to control Facebook. I think that she is, which her messaging aside, putting that ad on Facebook and then pointing to its removal as proof of her point, I think is marketing more so than it is a real critique. But yeah, like these corporations, Facebook, Google, there are a lot.
Twitter.
What are left of the media companies as they exist? What are we down to? 3 now? 4? Like, I don't know.
I think that's somewhat disingenuous there, because it's kind of like when we talk about, say, like splitting up Amazon or applying anti-monopoly legislation to Amazon. I get a lot of my stuff from Amazon, but the actual, like the amount of commerce that Amazon does in terms of retail, it's like less than 10% of the economy or something like that. Like there's a huge amount of competitors. None of them are as big, but there's a huge amount of competitors. So same thing with, with Twitter, Facebook, and all of that. There's all these different, various means by which you can communicate with people. It's not like we only have China. There's like one medium that you can communicate with people on, but you and I are free to email each other. We can text each other.
Yeah,
we can get on, AOL chat rooms.
Okay, yeah. So WeChat in China is what I'm trying to avoid.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, that is state-run, like state-controlled, more or less. But I think what we have in the United States is we have whatever policies Facebook wants to be implemented. In all likelihood, they're going to be able to influence enough of your elected representatives or senators in order to make that happen or not happen, depending on what it is that they want.
Well,
because they wield very real power, and not just in the United States, but internationally. That you have a lot of companies, a lot of organizations that have grown so much that, they exert power not just over the United States political system, but over the political systems of a lot of countries. And we need to... I'm pro-democracy. I'm for more people sharing power than I am for power being consolidated into fewer and fewer hands. And whatever we need to do to mitigate that, we can argue about the different policies, which I again, deeply respect Elizabeth Warren's intellect. I don't always completely agree with every policy that she puts forward, but I am for putting power in the hands of more, not fewer people's hands.
Well, we have to wrap up. I'll give my quick closing thought. But Royce, it was fun having you on. Thank you for joining me.
Always, yeah.
I don't. I'm not an anarchist. That said, though, I do not see the government as somehow sanctified by democracy the way a lot of people do. I think that there's a kind of bootlegged feudalism that's at work right now in the American psyche and in the European psyche, where it's like, well, if the government has been democratically elected, then it's been sort of divinely appointed, the way we used to have divine right monarchs. It's
right.
Clean and it's good. From my vantage point, the government's effectively a corporation that we've outsourced certain rights to. We've given it a monopoly on violence and power. We've given it the ability to run police, things like that. I'm not saying we should get rid of it, but I don't think it's emotionally different than a corporation. So when you're saying, in effect, that we're worried about these corporations, so we're going to give the biggest super corporation even more power to police them, it doesn't sit well with me.
We're going to give the one corporation that we actually are on the board of and have voting rights with.
Well, okay, so great thought experiment then. If we were to turn over the United States to the Microsoft Corporation, but you got to vote for their board of directors, would you be okay with that? I wouldn't.
No, just because that sounds too similar to rollerball.
Yeah. Well, okay, Royce, it was fun talking to you. Thank you for coming on.
Always. Thank you for having me. Again, huge fan. Keep doing what you're doing.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Tad bit of feedback before we leave on iTunes. Macbeken says, funny, smart, respectful. I wish I had a funnier review, but all I can think of is how great this podcast is. I'll leave the jokes to Andrew. Thank you. You can watch this whole show on YouTube. If you look for Something's Off with Andrew Heaton, you can see my handsome bearded face and assortment of suits and the dead bison head we screwed to the wall. Watching Something's Off with Andrew Heaton on your computer will not only make you seem more sophisticated and amusing at your office, but it will also wipe your internet search history at the same time. So go to YouTube and start watching full episodes. I look like one of the happy trees in a Bob Ross painting. Remember, you can always tweet me at Mighty Heaton or Facebook me at facebook.com/Mighty Heaton, or even email me by subscribing to my newsletter at mightyheaton.com and just replying when I send it out on Fridays. Finally, please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. That helps other people discover this here political orphanage. Thank you, and good day.